All right, we are live. Comments. Sick. I feel like you're famous. I like it. Okay, and then let me go to Facebook and share. Guess I should do it from my phone. So, close that. What up? What up? Come on in, everybody. Come on in. I'm just trying to figure out my life. So feel free to say hello in the chat if you are in here vibing with us. Time to get this show on the road. Share. Hey, Kelly, how are you? Thank you for joining us. No problem. Always good to see you. Kelly is my masseuse. She makes sure my bones don't fall apart. You know, have to be having this self-care, you know. Mm-hmm. Can't just be out here fighting the racisms all willy-nilly by myself. Gotta have the tribe.
Yeah. Gotta take care of yourself.
Man, try to.
Too much work, Remington.
I guess. With both of us coming from a certain background, I'm sure we both know it's a little something about too much work, huh?
We do what we can. We do what we can.
Ain't that the truth? Y'all feel free to share this out on your social media. The more shares and likes and all that, the more it notifies people. So thank you for doing that. You should be able to share it just like you share a post on Facebook. It's all the same. I'm actually texting it to a few people right now. Hopefully we can get us a little crowd in here. Also, remember, there will be a question and answer portion of the show. So feel free to put your comments, questions, things you resonate with in the chat. And I can actually have them scroll across during the Q&A. So anything that comes up during the conversation, feel free to speak up. Okay, share with people who you feel like might want to know this information. Some people who may not want to know it but need to know it. You know, might come through and learn a little something if they're willing. Might come through and learn a little something if they're willing. Oh, that makes sense. Might come through and learn a little something. Got about 3 minutes before we get started. We are just up in here vibing. What's up? What's up? Say hello in the chat if you're in here. I wish I could see like who all was in here, but I can't unless you say something in the chat. So please feel free to do so if you have a moment. I'd love to say hello. Ben, what is this background?
This is a background for a project that I was working on for Ultra, which is supposed to be like a news channel, talk about various things on YouTube. But I'm still trying to put together, find the time. So
yeah.
But Marcus did a fantastic job putting it together and creating everything.
Oh, that's nice. That's what's up. Look at all of us out here finding our way in the pandemic, doing our thing. We're making it work, making it shake. Let's see. Who else do I need to send this to? Got about 2 minutes and we're going to get started. I'm excited. Continuing his round 2 of Take a Seat. Ryan Case, I have not seen you in so long. Are you still in Mississippi? Okay, well, that's all the things I can think of at the moment. We're going to get started here in just a second. Thank y'all for coming through. Man, y'all been going through it out there, boy. How's y'all? How you doing? You staying safe, staying healthy? Woo! Us in these old United States and the way we take care of people, or the lack thereof. Heard some things about Mississippi and that young COVID. It's not playing any games out there. Oh, thank you, Kelly, for sharing my post. Oh, I guess I should send this to Ian. All right. Two for the first time. Man. Oh. Is she in preschool? Certainly she's not 5. Is she in kindergarten or she's in preschool? Yeah, I know this ain't got nothing to do with Take a Seat race talk, but now I'm interested. You got to protect the babies, the children. You got to stay masked up out there. Over here in Tennessee, we just got excused from the whole mask situation via executive order. They said if you write a note saying that you don't want your kid to wear a mask, then they ain't got to wear one. So you can be coughing and licking all over each other. It'll be a great time. Oh, I hope she stays safe, Ryan. Isn't that insane? Like, I've been trying not to think about how these kids, like, yeah, I've got a set of friends who their son was born maybe like right in like maybe he was like 6 months old at the start of the pandemic, and so he's never known a life without wearing a mask and social distance and all that. Like I just don't know. I don't know what impact that's gonna have. It's just it's something. That is something.
Mm-hmm.
All right, y'all. We are going to go ahead and get started. Let me stop sharing this, and that should go out. Boom. All right. Cool. As people start to come in, we did say we were going to start right here at 5, and so we're going to go ahead and get it started. People, feel free to jump in as necessary. If you can't stay the whole time, that's completely fine. Any questions, comments that come up, feel free to drop them over in the chat so we can have some content for our Q&A. All right. So welcome to episode 2 of Take a Seat Race Talks Live. For those who don't know, the mission of Take a Seat Race Talks is building allies who act in my interest in my absence. For those of you who follow me on Facebook, Instagram, who know me personally, you know I've always been an advocate for racial justice in the United States. And one of the things that I've realized in doing this work and becoming a consultant is that like there is a big gap in white people's knowledge of like how to support marginalized people in the fight for racial justice. And so that is why I started this conversation series, this web series, live show, whatever you want to call it, so that we have a place to have these conversations. And it's not, it's not arguing on Facebook. And so I'm excited to have my friend and I guess colleague also, I don't know if that's the right word to use, Ben Nadolsky here today. I met Ben during his summer institute at Teach for America, which I worked summer institute here in Nashville 1 year, and we met and have been in contact ever since. And I was just excited to be able to have him on because we've had plenty of talks about whiteness and white allyship and what it looks like and what it doesn't look like. So I'm going to let Ben introduce himself and we will get right into the conversation. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Remington. I really appreciate it. And, you've been a tremendous help, throughout my teaching career and will continue, I'm sure, to be a good friend and mentor and everything else. Right now, I'm about to go to law school. I spent 2 years doing Teach for America in Nashville. I originally graduated from Yale University in global affairs and history. I worked at the Department of Education, and now, like I said, I'm going into law school at the University of Pennsylvania. So I'll be moving up to Philadelphia, which I'm super excited about. So, yes.
Cool. All right. Well, there you go. Man, going to law school. I couldn't do it. I got a friend right now who's in law school, and it's just like watching him just pour himself down a black hole. And I'm just like, y'all better than me. So I guess somebody's got to do it. So thank you, Ben. And so just to remind folks, kind of our agenda for today is we're going to have a conversation, and today's conversation piece is related to part 2 of the interview that I released on my YouTube channel, Take a Seat Race Talks. And this interview, this section of the interview is about culture, identity, and values of white culture. And so we're going to be kind of diving into that. If you haven't had a chance to check the video out, you should. I'll try to drop the link in the chat when I get a chance for you to watch after this. And so we're going to have about a 20-minute conversation, and then there will be a space open near the end for Q&A. So that is where y'all come in. Anything that stands out to you during our conversation, any questions that come up, feel free to drop them in the chat in real time. I'll be able to access those and pull them up when the Q&A gets here. But I want to make sure that you can catch your thoughts. So if you're not driving, if you're somewhere where you can type in the chat, please do so during the conversation so we can have some Q&A here toward the end. So question number 1 to kick off our convo, Ben. Many times in psychology and human development, we hear about people's socialization. Actually, Ryan was just talking about the socialization of his daughter over in the chat, and thinking about these kids who have been born during the pandemic. What is their socialization going to look like? The messages they receive through their lived experience, which has obviously been different from our lived experience, and will shape who they are and who they grow to be someday. But in a similar vein, I want to kind of turn that question on its head a little bit and ask, what would you say is your racialization story? Like, what messages, whether implicit or explicit, did you receive about people who aren't white while you were growing up? And how has that impacted your worldview?
Yeah, so I grew up in East Tennessee, Knoxville, and it's a very heavily white part of Tennessee.
Ain't it?
and the parts that are not primarily white, it's very has a lot of de facto segregation, separated east and west. So where I'm particularly from, out in Farragut, in East Tennessee, you have it's basically majority white people, and the few black people that you do see would probably white people would say that they've integrated into white culture. And so you don't, they like other white people in the area don't, like, how do I put this? Like I have a close friend, and he would always tell me that racism doesn't exist because he's from Knoxville and he's never seen it. He hasn't been a part of it. He hasn't experienced it in a way that was meaningful. And that was always like, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, look at the news, like, look at, everything is going on, and it's not as simple as in your hometown, you're not around anybody who's different from you. Like, you don't see you're not seeing it just because you're not like experiencing it in that moment. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I think there's a lot of confusion that happens because of that, and a lot of false beliefs that develop. I remember like when I was a kid, actually my grandparents, their neighbors are black. And so I was always hang out with them. We would get together, and I remember watching like at my own house, but watching like Proud Family, like Out of the Box, different things. Like, there's a lot of different cultural elements to my upbringing that I was a part of. That I felt had a lot of value in recognizing differences and seeing people and who they are, and what they bring to the table. And when I was 9, I was paralyzed, and I went up to Baltimore, Maryland. So that was definitely a culture shock from what I was used to, being in like primarily white East Tennessee. You're going to Baltimore, Maryland. That's not that way. And I remember like the first time of feeling like otherness was really because of my disability. And I remember I went to an outing after, like, this was during my physical rehabilitation. They would go and they would take, kids out to the mall or whatever else to hang out. And there was this girl, and she was crying, and she had been in a drive-by shooting, and she had she had been shot 5 times, and she had a very visible. It wasn't meant for her. It was just a freak, thing that had happened, and she had a very visible limp, and she was sitting on the bench with the recreational therapist crying. She was upset, and she was really afraid to go back to school. She didn't know what her friends were going to think of her, and how they would perceive her. And at that point, I had never thought about it in my mind. I never had to confront any sort of otherness. Like being white Tennessee, I'm a white guy, didn't have any health problems or anything else going on. Like, you never had to think about that. But when I went over and talked to her and asked her what was going on, and she told me that, and it kind of hit me. I was like, maybe things when I go home aren't going to be just like they were. It's not going to be, as simple as like just picking back up and resuming for where we left off. And I think that was really a kind of a big experience for me. But we talked about it, and she was feeling a lot better. Her mom actually came and talked to my mom and was very happy that I had taken the time to speak. But it was definitely a wake up call to me that it's not as simple as my mind had framed it as, that the world exists outside of one type of existence. So
So you had that experience like very early on. I'm thinking about my last week's show with Chelsea, and she talked about that too. Like Chelsea and I went to high school together. We're both from Jackson, Tennessee, so we're West Tennessee, and now that I think about it, like I remember in college when the first time somebody asked me, like, is Jackson a majority black city? And my answer at first was no, but I actually think it is. And like that just tells you how strong the tracking and, you know, zoning was for schools. But like I just think about how important it was. Chelsea cited this too, that she had a lot of friends who were not white or not completely like drenched in white culture when she was in high school, and that really impacted her ability to care about black people, to like think about the world a different way, or even to just kind of crack open the shell and say, hey, what if things aren't how I think they are, or what if there are other perspectives in the world. So that's interesting that you both had some kind of moment or some kind of influence like that early on in life.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, my family is originally from Pennsylvania. They had moved down to Alabama in the 70s for my grandfather to get his doctorate at Auburn University. And so my mom was in middle school in Alabama when they were desegregating schools, when they had begun that process. So I remember, she would tell me her stories about, the first black student that was in her, I think it was like fourth grade class or something like that, or sorry, like sixth grade class,
Lord.
like that. I remember my grandmother telling me a story about how she went to a clinic and, just I guess to like check up for a cold. And this black guy comes in and he's bleeding and hurt. And they asked her to come back and they wouldn't see him. They said, oh, you have to go in the back way if you want to be seen. And she left. She wasn't going to have it, but it was just like hearing those stories, it was a very, like moving for me and to understand like that it runs deep, and it's like to have like having have family members that have not experienced the segregation but have at least seen it and be able to tell me about it, like from a firsthand, having lived in the South and seeing how bad it was. I think that also had a tremendous impact.
Yeah, kind of in relation to that, one of the things that I talk about in my interview on YouTube is like how for a lot of folks, especially the rhetoric now, I am shocked to hear the number of white people who think racism and segregation are over. Like they're like, oh, we had black president. Y'all can run around and do whatever you want. Woohoo! We're all free, baby. Equal footing, level playing ground. But like I say in the interview, my mom is the first person in my family not to pick cotton for a living. Like, and I know the history books make it seem like it was so long ago. And then if you are removed from the South, from my understanding, this time of slavery and segregation and racism is talked about in even more of a distant way. But like it is still here. I am not even a generation removed, like a full generation removed from someone who picked cotton. And so like my grandma picked cotton, my aunt picked cotton, my great grandma who I was raised by had to drop out of school to pick cotton. And so like, I just think it's so important for people to talk to someone other than the people they always talk to. Even you choosing to ask about these things or hear these stories from your grandparents is a good start, at least,
Yeah, and I think that's an excellent point about the distance of the history. Like it feels like they make it feel like it was so long ago that these things existed, that segregation existed. It's like, and when I say segregation, I mean like legal segregation. It still exists in absolutely in de facto and even I guess technically legally as well. But the whole deal is like being able to have Jim Crow laws, I guess is what we would say, that actually, mandate segregation. It wasn't that long ago. You think about, what is it, 50 years ago, 60 years ago? It's not a long time. And
I think Nashville was 1971 was the integration of schools, or maybe it was when children with special needs could go to typical schools or something like that. It wasn't that long ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think that like allows people to frame it in their mind as though it's gone. And as you said, oh, well, we had, President Obama, like, he's a black man, therefore, you've had it all. What else could you want? Like, yeah, I mean, it lets people feel like there has been some sort of reconciliation, like it's okay, like it's bygones be bygones, don't worry.
Right. Let it go. All right, guys. We did our just due. It's fine.
Exactly.
Fine.
Yeah, but that's paid. Yeah. Thank you.
So moving on to kind of the second question here, in part 2 of the interview, the theme was like the values and where identity comes from in white culture. And like one of the things that came up in the interview is this idea of white individualism and how it yields a different set of values than the values of marginalized people or people of color. And so like for folks who don't know or have an intimate understanding of individualism, so like there are kind of 2 buckets of culture. Individualism, where if you're from an individualistic culture, is a culture where the central decision-making unit is you and your nuclear family. So me and the absolute tightest circle of people closest to me. If that's who I make my decisions based on, that is a characteristic of an individualistic society versus a collectivist society whose kind of concentric circles in decision making are far more reaching. I think one of the examples that I talk about is when people used to make fun of rappers who would bring their whole posse on the stage to receive a Grammy. And, people be like, rappers always have an entourage. They're always with this person and that person. And it's like, because Black people are from a collectivist culture. We're not just here to get all the money and rise to the top and step on whoever we have to step on to get there. We are centered around this idea of, I want to make sure that everybody, as many people as possible, can come with me and are going to be doing okay when I'm doing okay. Is much more centered on family, on relationship, people being in close relationship proximity to you. And so like, I know you and I have had these conversations about when you were teaching, about how you recognized how much of maybe your identity or kind of like some of your value and your worth was tied up in your ability to do your job well. Can you talk about what you've learned about your personal values and identity as a white person in the last few years?
Yeah, so I think through teaching, it really got framed differently in my mind. I think the perfect thing you told me, it was like, it's not about you, Ben. It's about the kids. Like, it doesn't matter, what you think or how you think you're doing. If you're helping them, you're helping them. That's what matters. And I know I brought that up several times at our summit for Teach for America, and so many other people resonated with that sentiment. Remington, I like. It's about the kids. It's about the community. And it's about contributing as much as you can. And it's not my success is tied to their success. So it's not just me being, especially in a role as a teacher, my individual success doesn't matter if my kids aren't successful, right? I can climb the ranks and go from a teacher to a dean to a vice principal to a principal or whatever. But if I didn't help my kids along the way, I was not successful. I may have my career. I may, try to tie that into like, look how successful I am within my identity. But in reality, I never did that. I never actually helped anybody. I never actually was able to contribute in a way that was meaningful. And I think that's part of the way that that Black culture and white culture, when you have and I want to tweak when we say collectivist, because like a country like China would say that they're collectivist, but it's a little bit different for Black America versus China. China doesn't care about you as a person. They care about their government and how well it does, how well their country does. You as an individual don't matter, right? But from what I've seen in Black collectivism, it's more about like, you matter, Remington, I matter, my students, each one of them matters. It's not about just getting everyone, getting people to the top. It's about raising everybody up. It's about caring about the whole community. As you said, it's about, if you're, the rapper winning the Grammy, you're bringing your whole posse up. You're not going up there and then, it didn't matter about everyone else. It matters about the whole community. It's not just singular. It's not sacrifice everybody else. So that way that one person can find success. And I think that a lot of the times in white culture, we relate individualism and the success that we find from that as being good or bad. Like good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. And if you are successful, if you got into Yale, or you got into Harvard, or you went and got the new job that pays, 6 figures or whatever it is, that's now your identity. And you must be a good person because of that. You have earned that status. Whereas that's not how the world works. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. It isn't so cut and dry. And I think this, is mixed a lot within the shift that we've seen with, and this happens in more liberal circles, but you see this within, conservative ideology, especially when it comes to like the gospel of prosperity, right? Like what you have indicates your worth. And I think that's dangerous. I think it's important to view us as a whole, and that we should work together. I think that that's what individualism lacks. I have on my Twitter, I actually have a thing, and I say, what makes the United States great in many ways is its combination between collectivism and individualism. But when we lose that, and I think we're in a bad, like right now, I think the pandemic is an amazing example of when individualism goes too far, right? When you have when people stop forgetting about their brother and sisters, and saying like getting vaccinated, right? Like you're doing it for yourself, but you're also doing it for your community and to support them and to make sure that everyone can remain healthy and stay alive. So, I think those are my thoughts around those two things. And we've talked about it many times between individualism and collectivism and teaching, and what I was able to kind of gather from that. And I'm sure I still have so much learning to do, for sure. I have no doubts. And and maybe, a year down the road, I'll look at this and I'll say, what was I saying? I have no idea. But I think it's always good to have that conversation and to examine it and how we can push it forward and help people come to understand that it's about our whole community. It's about helping as many people as possible.
Yeah, man, that's a mouthful. Like there's so many nuggets in there of like when individualism goes too far. Like I feel like I surprise people when I talk about the pandemic. Like people, I think they ask me like, how is your life during the pandemic? And I'm kind of more concentrated on what is this pandemic showing us about ourselves as a people. And like, I think you are so correct in we are watching it play out with the whole pandemic thing of like, I went into a Kroger today in a very wealthy part of Nashville, and every person of color had on a mask. Every white person did not. And like, it is crazy to see it so cut and dry in data in real life, knowing how many people are dying, knowing how many people are getting, COVID vaccinated or not, I still want to do what I want to do, you know? And so to see that lived out in a time, one of the things I keep going back to is I saw a meme that said, well, I guess we have to retire the phrase avoid it like the plague. And it's like, well, yeah, because shit, we don't care apparently, as long as it don't plague me, then that's fine. Like that is the premise of individualism. If it doesn't affect me and my nuclear family, then I'm just going to ignore it. And so, these protests and these cries out when you hear white individualist people saying, oh, we shouldn't be destroying this or we shouldn't be doing that, XYZ. Like, it's like, yeah, it's easy for you to say that from where you are. Like, this isn't your problem. They're not murdering you in the streets for nothing. Like, I get it. Like, yes, if you take that lens and you put yourself and the people closest to you at the center, no, you shouldn't riot. That's why you're behind your keyboard typing on Facebook, because you don't need to. But there are other people in the world who aren't you, and they do need to be heard. They do need to be seen. What I was thinking about, like, what did the challenge look like for you in the classroom? Like, collectivism versus individualism. I do remember we had a lot of conversations in the beginning where I felt, if I remember this correctly, I felt like you had this strong sense of justice and what was right for the kids, but the people you were working for always wanted you to do something different. And I feel like we kind of had to, continue to rehash, like, how does Ben do what he feels is right, and what keeps Ben or kept Ben from doing what he felt was right. So, like, do you feel like individualism or culture or your own sets of values that came from white culture had something to do with preventing you from doing what you knew was the right thing in the moment?
Yeah, I think that a lot of you're trying to conform to what the leadership wants. If they want you to respond to students in a certain way, then that's how you're kind of supposed to respond. Like, authority is what you listen to. That's what you go for. I'm from I'm Catholic, and we very much like you follow. I went to Catholic school. You follow the rules. You do X, X, and X. And
so your odds were really stacked against you, huh?
I think when you combine individualism with it, there's a, and especially in white culture, there's a large sense, at least from my experience, there's a large sense of like personal whatever that is. And and so, like, when you first come into the classroom, like, I think a lot of the framing is like, these students just need to do X, like they need to stop being this certain way, right? That's that they don't have anything else going on in their lives that's causing them to do that, right? And it's like, I understand we need to push our students so they can achieve great things, but at the same time, I have to be willing to give them grace and understand what is going on in their life, right? Like, why are they doing whatever they're doing? And so, like, I when I first went in, I tried to conform and listen, and then I redirected my approach. It wasn't like, that's a demerit, get back to work. It was a, hey, what's going on? What's happening? Like, are you right? Do you need to get some water? You need to go for a quick walk? What do you need so you can get back in the game? Like there was something that was causing my student to opt out, and I had to figure out what that was. And it wasn't something that was like they just needed to take responsibility and do it. It was like, they were thinking about something at home, or they were really struggling with the work and they weren't sure what to do, and they just needed me to come over and explain to them because they were afraid to ask, or whatever else it was, right? Like there's so many factors that go on in kids' heads, and they just need sometimes that nudge, that grace to help them. I watch some of the things that happens, to encounters between like Black men and police, and police not giving, like, in many cases in the videos that I've seen, not giving a lot of grace to what's happening, not giving a lot of agency to say, like, hey, is everything all right? Like, what is happening? Like approaching it de-escalation mindset, right? Like, don't escalate the situation. Always come in assuming the best intentions of everybody and then go from there. If you go in thinking that someone is a certain way, then of course you're going to go in guns blazing and act, act horribly. And I think that's just a dangerous mindset.
Dang, like I didn't think about how much gosh, there's so many things going through my head. Like in my last year, this past year of consulting, I felt like I was teaching white people a lot to stop making a rule about people, because like people aren't governed by rules. They're governed by a shit ton of things, circumstances, like other relationships, things going on in your life. We're not just walking around doing everything at 100% all the time, hitting every mark, boom, boom, boom. Like, we're people, we have stuff going on. And for you to talk about, even I felt it when you said, instead of, hey, that's a demerit, get back to work, the question of what's going on. Those are such different approaches. They are opposite approaches. And like, I think about when I don't know why I've been thinking so much about my time in the classroom recently, but like, those are some of the moments that really stand out to me, where I had the relationship with my students. It didn't matter if they were Black or white or whatever. I had the relationships where I could lead, or maybe just the type of person I was, coming from a collectivist culture. I value you, the person, first. Mm-hmm. And whatever it is that we are trying to accomplish here, we're not going to accomplish it if you're not well as a person. It's not going to happen. And so I think that is just a really good point that you made about how you have to steer away from that culture of individualism that says the project or the goal is the most important thing. We got to reach the goal. We got to get there. We got to do this. No, like, sometimes the fact that my mom just, is in the hospital, or my grandma just got diagnosed with cancer, I guarantee you that's more important than math. I guarantee it,
Oh, no, sorry. I don't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead. No, you're fine. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and I think that it's not mutually exclusive. It's not like I need to tell you to get back to work and you get back to work. It's kind of like when you tell someone to hurry up, like, you just got to hurry up. We got to go. We got to go. It actually causes them to not hurry up. They fumble. They can't get it together. Like you're actively putting stress on them. And from my experience in the classroom, like, it only made students opt out more, because you were taking the you were escalating the situation with them. You were urging them on to continue because you didn't see them as a person to begin with. You were just telling them to do the work.
Woo! You don't have to do it like that, man. Tell it like it is. You got to see them as people first. And I guess it's still related, but I don't know. I guess I do know why, but I am just so surprised how hard that is for the white people that I encounter. Like, I would go into certain meetings about certain things as I'm working with these schools and consulting, and what to me seems like this very clear and simple response that centers the person. When I would suggest that, it was like the whole room would be like, oh my God, he just invented water. I did not know we could value the person instead of the project, or the person instead of the goal. Or I don't know how to do that consistently. Or I feel guilty not pushing personal responsibility in this situation. And so, like, can you speak to have you experienced any of that as a white male who is kind of has made or is making this transition to see things less individualistically?
I think that it's how easy it is to repeat, right? And it's easy to fall into the trap of going back towards the get back to work. It's the easy option. It's the kind of the innate feeling, like, just do it. You just got to do it. Like just suck it up, make it happen. And that's kind of the fallback that you want to kind of rest on. And that was definitely something that I struggled with my first year of teaching, and not so much my second year of teaching, when I had a lot more support. My ninth grade dean was amazing during my second year of teaching, and he really helped me a lot. But my first year, it was Wild West out there, and you were trying to do whatever you could, but the problem is then you were relying on tactics that were not good for kids, and everyone was, because you're trying to do whatever you can, and if you don't understand, and especially if you're a teacher, first year teacher, you have no idea what you're doing. You're just trying to breathe and figure out what is going on. I have no idea, and it kind of you're put through the gauntlet on that one. So that was
Was it hard to have grace for yourself in that situation?
I think it was. I think for me, like, I had you, so it was easier to be able to figure out what was going on in my mind and be able to kind of sort my thoughts. But I think from what I saw, a lot of teachers have a lot of frustrations. There were days where, including myself, you kind of just wanted to cry. Like, you felt like you were failing, you weren't doing your job right, you were trying to do your best, but things just weren't working. Why? How do you go, especially when you're doing Teach for America, you go from usually you go from like being really successful, whatever you're doing in school or wherever you're coming from, to do Teach for America. And then you do it and you're suddenly not successful at all. And so for my own experience, that was traumatic. I found success in other ways. I created my robotics team at the school, and that was awesome. And I got to see the kids like really flourish and do amazing things through that. But I was also engaging what their interests were and what their passions lie and everything else. And that was where I got to see it and feel that success. But in the classroom, definitely did not feel that success my first year.
Oh man, thank you for sharing that. And so like, I guess like my next question is like, when, where, and how do you feel like you learned the most about your whiteness? Like, what experience have you had that made you recognize that everyone is not the same, like in your adult life? I know you talked about when you met the kid who had been involved in the drive-by, and like that's kind of started it for you. But like, what's some things that have happened more recently, and it could be teaching related, it could be not, whatever, that have made you recognize that like, wow, everybody is not the same?
Yeah, I mean, I really like meeting that student. It was, my whiteness is also mixed with the intersectionality of disability. So it really kind of colors that background for me. It really shows me, I don't know the same experience to be Black, but I do know kind of feelings of isolation and feelings of being removed from the main group, right? And the thing is like, if you're multiply marginalized, so if you're Black and disabled, your experience is radically different than mine as a white disabled person, right? The disability community, and this was at Yale when I really got involved with various activism. I created Defy Disability Empowerment for Yale, which is all about disability rights, disability advocacy, and trying to get as many people involved with that as possible. And that really helped shape my understanding. But one of the big problems within disability community is it being extremely white. And the reason that and one of the reasons, at least I hypothesized this, that is extremely white, and is because white people have had the resources and the ability to overcome the societal barriers that are created due to the disability. So if you're, one of the largest groups of people that are in prison are Black men and women who have a mental disability or mental health problem, right? It's a huge portion. And that is a group of people that are not just my allies, but are, part of my, coalition as a disabled person. And, but their experience is still radically different from mine, right? Within the disability community, my needs are not the same as a blind person or someone who's deaf or someone who has any other, disability. But we still have those shared experiences of isolation, of removal, of barriers, of being seen as, like incapable in many ways. I'll never forget we did a survey for the Yale College Council, and we asked like, should Yale increase the number of disabled students on campus? And someone had typed in an answer in response and said, why would we want more disabled students? They're inherently less able. So like, I mean, that was a small group of people, but like, you know, if that is existing there, like how is it existing in the broader, you know, spectrum? And then what does that mean for people like who are multiply marginalized? What does it mean for other people that aren't, you know, don't have the privilege of having white skin like myself? And I think that is like, I think it's brutal and it's horrible. And it's like, you know, I'm of a big believer that, you know, like we're kind of all in this together and we're trying to do our best, you know, to make the world a better place. And like, we don't have room for that type of hate. Like, just like
right. That was rude shit. Damn. Like, okay. So well, wow. Man, that's crazy. Like, and so similar. Like, I have this idea or this theory like that I've been kind of testing out and I'm working on that I call transitive empathy. Like, a lot of people feel like to empathize with someone, you have to have the exact same situation as them. And so like if I'm going to be able to empathize with Ben, I have to have become paralyzed at age 9. That way I can say, I know exactly how you feel. And now we're best friends who completely understand each other. But like my argument there is that empathy is about the feeling, not necessarily the event or the tragedy or whatever the case. So like I am far more lenient and flexible in my definition of empathy, where I heard you say like, I know what it feels like to be isolated. And then with the further, more direct statement, why would we want more disabled people? They're inherently less able. Like, I feel that I empathize with that, where when I go to places like these private institutions or these very whitewashed areas of town, and maybe no one will say it out loud, but that's what it feels like to me. Why would we want you here? And so like, I think that's really important for people to be able to connect, like especially white folks who are trying to be helpful and trying to be understanding to the fight for racial justice. You have to connect to the terrible, low down, fucked up shit that's happened to you. What a terrible thing to read about yourself. You know, like, why would we want you here? But I think that's necessary that you connect to that and look at it in the eyes and face it. And it creates a connection between us for something that I may never know what it feels like to read that and be a disabled person. You may never know what it feels like to go to this side of town and, you know, feel disenfranchised as a Black person, but we are connected through the feeling. We don't have the exact same situation, but because you have been willing to dive into some of the harder parts of your own life, it makes a connection between us. And I wish like that. I think that is my biggest complaint about privilege. I think I would be fine if the United States just favored white people in the stuff that they favor them in, but white people said, instead of just riding that wave, I'm still going to look at my trauma. I'm still going to connect with my tragedy so that I can connect with other people and help them. The thing about privilege that makes me so upset is that it robs white people of the human experience, and it makes them think that it's normal to have everything done for you and to just look over the bad things that have happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is imperative for white people to connect to their trauma in order to support people like myself who don't have a choice. Like I can detach from the ideas and the hurt of being Black, but
Mm-hmm.
I can only go so far before something in Nashville, Tennessee reminds me that I'm Black.
Mm-hmm.
I can only go so far.
Yeah. No, and I think, I think about it, obviously our experiences are vastly different, and even the feelings can be different in ways, but similar, that make those connections. And I think that, when you walk into a room, the first thing people see for me is my wheelchair. And I imagine, a lot of the time when you walk into a room, when it's full of white people, the first thing they see for you is the color of your skin. Right.
Yeah.
And it adds a instantaneous bias or set of assumptions they see for you because of that. And what they think is possible for your life and what you're capable of and everything else. And it's, it's dangerous in many ways, as you know, and it is. But I think that there is some sense of connection that can be pulled from that, to create a broader coalition of people and to help make change.
Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna run us into our last question before the Q&A. Folks, if they're thank you all for staying with us this long and listening to this conversation. Ben just came in here dropping gems, dropping that hot fire on us. If there's anything that's resonated with you or any questions that you have hearing about Ben's experience, my experience, please feel free to drop those in the chat. I'm gonna ask him one more question before we move to the Q&A. So final question for you, Ben. What is one thing that you've learned in your journey toward allyship that you think other white people could really benefit from understanding as they try to enter these spaces of uplifting Black people, marginalized people, disabled people, people who don't have all the privileges that they may have? What is a lesson that you've learned that you think your white colleagues would also benefit from?
I think understanding that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to constantly make mistakes. I'm sure I made mistakes throughout our chat. It happens, and it's to acknowledge them and to say, like, I'm going to do better every single time I make a mistake, and I'm going to try to continue to push that allyship and push my thinking to expand it and to understand people better. And I think I think it's really easy for people to get locked down in their own pride of the situation, and to be afraid even to stand up for people or to do anything, because they're afraid of making that mistake and looking a certain way. I know people that will actively not say something, because they're afraid that they're going to mess up and that then they're going to look like they're racist if they say something because they said the wrong thing. And it's like, if you don't say anything at all, you're not doing anything about it. And so part of it is understanding that you're going to make mistakes, and like, that's okay, but you have to learn from them and you have to improve and continue to improve. Like, never stop improving. I think that's one of the most valuable parts of criticism, is that, like, you can take that information, you can take it personally and say, well, now I'm just going to ignore you. Or you can say, well, what can I learn from this? How can I do better? And I think, and you see this a lot, you'll see people talk about, get upset when people call the United States racist. I'm like, no, let's acknowledge a problem. Let's figure out let's see it, and then let's address it. Like, don't try to hide stuff. Don't try to pretend it isn't there. Like, we have to go after it. And the only way we can do that is to first acknowledge the problem. And so in the same way, you're going to make mistakes, acknowledge it and fix it. Like,
yeah,
that's and you don't always, like, I remember I had made a comment that was insensitive, not intentionally, during Summit. And one of the instructors had taken notice, and he like pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Ben, did you mean this? Like, what was up?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize, like, coming from East Tennessee, I didn't even realize that was an insensitive comment to make." And so understanding that it happens, and that but you have to be prepared to change and to acknowledge your mistakes and to not allow pride to keep you, fixed in whatever you did or said or, error that occurred. And I think it's really important to learn from that and to improve.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's funny that it seems to me connected to what I just talked about like wishing that white people would just acknowledge the parts of their life that they don't necessarily have to. Like, when you were saying, like, let that put that pride aside. Yes, I get it that you're not going to be discriminated against based on your race. I get it that you don't want to feel bad for coming from a family where you had an inheritance. But like, I'm not asking you to feel bad. I'm just asking you to acknowledge it. Like, acknowledge that we have different situations. Mm-hmm. Don't talk to me like I'm just being lazy or I should have done this way or this that way when you started $1 million ahead of me in your business. Just acknowledge that we are in different places,
Yeah, and I think you can't, you're comparing things that can't be compared in the first place, and you're trying to then say that other person is less than because of that, and it's like that's not how it works.
It's not how it works.
Everyone starts at a different place, and you have to recognize that and understand that, that there is racism in the world, there is ableism, there's homophobia and everything else that exists that actively work to harm people, and we have to push back against that and to say what can we do to make it better and to keep trying and trying and trying and trying.
Yeah, and trying and trying and trying. Ben, I know I've asked you a shit ton of questions. Do you have any questions for me? I don't know if we didn't rehearse this, didn't think about this part. Because I haven't gotten any questions in the chat yet. So if people want to put questions in the chat, feel free. But Ben, is there anything that you want to ask me about or you want me to talk about?
Yeah, I always think back to a conversation that I had with my students, and this is related to Nashville, but the gentrification of cities and the kind of depriving people of where they've been from, where they've lived, their communities to be taken over. And I think, and I remember my kids were very upset about that. Places where they had gone regularly, now are suddenly off limits because that was, in Nashville, a white person area, quote unquote, de facto type of situation. What are your thoughts on that?
Whoa, child. I hate gentrification. And this is one of the things that I would say for the last 2 years has eaten at me. And like, I don't have the tools necessary to deal with it the way I want to, because I also live in a gentrifying neighborhood. And like, it's honestly in Nashville, it's really hard to find one that's not that. And so like, what I have started to do is say to myself, when I make it big and make my billions and help the white folks get it all together and get the United States on track to racial justice, I am going to find a way to stop gentrification in its form. And like, I'll see if I can paint the picture that's in my head. So like, coming from a collectivist culture, there are these like traits or values that when I'm doing presentations, I'll put them side by side so people can see how opposite individualism and culture and collectivism are. And so like, where your identity comes from, where your value comes from in individualism is what you have. Where your value comes from in collectivism is who you are. And your relationship, your relation to people. And so the thing that breaks my heart and burns my biscuits about gentrification is that white people are gaining more of what's valuable to them in their culture, which is stuff, property value, flipping the real estate. So you get more of that, and we lose the little stuff that we did have, which was our home and the place that we're from, and the most important resource in our community, hands down, which is closeness to our people. And I never feel like I can get white people to understand how this is not just a business opportunity. It's not. I had a friend of mine who does real estate who says, well, they get the money for their house. I don't care. That's not what this is about. It's not what this is about. It's about the fact that people who come from a collectivist culture, our real estate is our relationships. It's our proximity to people we care about. And when I lose the option, it's not like I'm selling because I want to. Don't try to frame this as if I woke up one morning and said, you know what will be a bustling business opportunity? Selling the only house I've ever owned to not be able to buy a new one in the place where I've lived for the last 50 years. That sounds like a really good idea to me. That's not how this is happening. It's when the property value and the property tax gets so high that I can no longer afford it. I scraped and scrounged to make the best of a bad situation. If you're a Black person, imagine what you had to go through to own a house in the South, and this in the year 2021. So not only do I have to throw away all of that and everything that I went through, I don't even have a choice. I thought that buying this house was going to set me up for life. But then when white people decided they wanted more of what they already have, I have to lose one of the most valuable things I could have ever had, and my experience getting it. Yeah. And so it is just treacherous. It is despicable to me, the ease with which white folks knock down Black people's and marginalized people's most treasured values and memories and just build right on top of it like it was never there. And it's such a codent metaphor for the United States. Like, white people will come in and take anything that they want and act like it wasn't a big deal. Oh, this is just how the cookie crumbles. This is just how it's made. No, you're choosing this. You're choosing this.
Yeah.
And so it's a hot button for me. I hate gentrification because of all of the little insidious digs that are under it that white people don't even know about. It's just a flip for them. It's just a property value thing for them. And that's what kills me.
Do you see there being a form of gentrification that is about empowering communities? That's about returning wealth to those communities and giving them opportunities. That's not just like sell your house. Do you think there's ways to empower Black businesses, minority businesses to create communities that are increasing in wealth and are more prosperous financially speaking?
That would require white people to take a seat. It will require white people to come in and out of the goodness of their heart or the desire to see better for people who aren't them, for them to come in and give a fair type of split or development to the people who are here. Like, I live in an area in Nashville where if you ask anybody about this area who lived here 5 years ago, they say, oh, wow, I would never go over there. But then if you ask the people who have lived here from 5 years forward, they're like, oh my gosh, it is so nice over there. And so, like, if we go back to what you talked about in the beginning, one of those, like both of those really, don't acknowledge people as people. It's like it is agreed upon that the people here before were bad and now the people here are good. And that's just terrible. It's terrible. And so I would think if I reimagine how this could have happened, yes, you could build a house, but you don't need two. Like, or, like ask the people here what they need as opposed to coming in and saying, hey, it looks to me like you need a dog park.
Mm-hmm.
I'll build that. It's like, bro, don't nobody want that. Like, that's not what I needed. And so, like, there will have to be everything that we've talked about in this conversation, white people will have to do and ask folks what they need, come at it not like that's a demerit, get back to work. It will have to be, hey, what's going on? What do you need? What's going on in your neighborhood? How can I help?
Yeah.
And that's not the heart of the gentrifier.
Yeah, well, yes, that is the unfortunate. That is the unfortunate fact, and I think there are ways to improve, to help communities, and to kind of start restoring the generational wealth that has been deprived of Black people and minority communities in the United States, and to allow people to start building that back. So I really think that is something that may not happen from people who are looking to make money, but for communities that are looking to improve themselves, and for the city of Nashville to come in and say, like, how are we going to improve these communities without destroying them at the same time? These communities have value to us because they're human beings, and every human being has intrinsic value.
So, hey, even that's a leap, though.
I mean, that like ideology for a lot of people,
right? You would think that's bare bones, but that's a leap in individualistic, capitalistic United States. That's a leap that every person has value. That's a leap.
Yeah, I mean, and like that. And that really comes from my Catholic upbringing. Funny enough, is every person has human dignity, and that's where I kind of pull some of that from, and thinking how we should think about everybody, is everyone has that intrinsic value, that intrinsic dignity, that they deserve respect, no matter who they are, whether or not I've deemed you as good or bad. You deserve respect. You deserve dignity in that, and I think that is. I think that's something that we lose sight of and forget, and we get caught up in the. You have money, that's good. You don't have money, that's bad.
That's bad, right?
You have white skin, that's good. You have black skin, that's not good. You get torn into these like dichotomies that destroy people, they destroy communities, and they ruin nations. And I think it's part of it is looking at how do we start to repair that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, this has been great, Ben. Thank you for coming on. Thank you, everyone who came through. This was wonderful as we wrap up. I just wanted to say thank you to our guests. Thank you to all of our audience members. Ben, do you want to tell people where they can find you on socials?
Yeah, at Ben Nadolsky, Twitter. And then if you want to catch me on email, you can go to my website, benjaminnadolsky.com, Nadolsky. And it's, as like a closing thought, it's always about seeking to figure out what you're doing wrong and improve, and to continue and make a difference, and acknowledge when you failed and when you need to make it right.
Agreed. Take a Seat Race Talks Live will be back in 2 weeks on September 3rd. So be on the lookout. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. There's a lot of content coming out over there. If you want to hop on YouTube, it is Take a Seat Race Talks. And you should be able to type that in and find it. I'm on the road to 100 subscribers. I'm at 46 right now, I do believe. So we almost halfway there. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Ben. We will catch y'all in 2 weeks.